Welcome to the Worthy Woman podcast with Aston Simmons. And today I have such a beautiful guest and such a powerful conversation with just such a beautiful, mothering, nurturing energy. Already I can feel it before we went live. So I'm super excited to share the beautiful Elle with you today and the incredible work she does. She is a fertility and conception coach, and she specializes in overcoming the mental and emotional barriers to infertility. We were just talking off air how so often all of the emotional energetics, how you actually feel in your body is completely pushed to the side when it comes to fertility or even actually relationships or anything in this modern world that we live in that just wants to fix everything, with a pill or with a surgery or whatever it is. And we were just sharing and speaking off air before that it's just so frustrating that we live in 2023 and some people are still thinking that it's woo-woo to look at the energy of your relationship or to connect in with the mind-body connection of your body. We can all logically make sense of stuff, but the body keeps the score. There's literally a whole book about it, and there's so much science about it. So go and read up on it if you don't know what I'm talking about. But today we're going to be really peeling back the layers of this conversation for you. And if you are someone who has experienced infertility, the beautiful Elle's going to share her story, which is so powerful and beautiful. If you know somebody who has, we were just talking off air that I think it's 1 in 6 couples now are experiencing infertility, so that really has an impact on relationships. So with this conversation, we want you to know you're not alone. If you're going through this, or if I want you to know there is other people going through it within your circle that you don't even know about, because Elle and I were just sharing that, like relationship challenges, it's not considered normal to talk about these things. And we really want to normalize it because it's really just part of life. And, the more we can have these conversations, the more we can heal ourselves, the more we can heal each other, and this is really what we want. We want vulnerable, connected relationships and communities. So then we need to be able to get past this I'm fine barrier and just speak the truth of what's really going on for us. So I've already had goosebumps. I'm super excited for this chat. I'm going to pass it over to Elle before we dive any deeper and just let her share a little bit more about who she is, because this beautiful woman is doing incredible work, but there is so much more to her as well. So thank you so much for being here, Elle.
Oh, Aston, thank you so much. That was so beautiful. I have goosebumps as well. This is just going to be the most beautiful conversation. I'm so honored to be here, and I've been looking forward to this so much. Who am I beyond the bio? Well, I am just such a passionate person. I am a mum now after a long struggle with infertility. I do identify as an infertility warrior, but I'll get to that in a moment. So I'm a mum. We do have a happy ending to our story, which is just amazing. I'm a fiance. I am a small business owner. We live in North Queensland in Townsville, and I just love getting outside. We've got horses. I'm just your typical Aussie, grounded, authentic girl who just likes to play with her animals and feel her feet in the grass and all of those sorts of amazing things. And just, yeah, really loving spending time with my loved ones at the moment. It's just warming my heart so much.
Oh, so beautiful. I can literally see the horses. I feel like I know you so much deeper already. That is so incredible. And I literally got goosebumps when you said that you identify as an infertility warrior. I was just like, oh, I love it when women take the challenges that they go through and it makes them, it shapes them and it makes them, it doesn't break them. And I think that's what makes a worthy woman. It's not a woman who's perfect. I am in no way or shape perfect. I've definitely been through challenges. But to me, the true definition of that worthy woman is that she goes through challenges and she comes out the other side, and it has been the making of her, because she has decided to let it empower her. So that is what I feel about your story. So I would love for you to open with sharing your incredible story and your journey. And I think we can all just get so much from that, even if we haven't been through infertility, I have even noticed myself in your story. So there's always challenges and things that we can relate to. And I think your story is so beautiful and so powerful.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I feel like you couldn't have been more right and on the money when you said that our struggles really did make me into who I am today. And, I didn't choose for that journey. So I do say make me because it's not something that I would have chosen for myself had I known what was to come in future. But I hardly even recognize myself now on the other side of everything that we've been through. But at the end of the day, it is so much for the better. I've found my passion in life, my life's purpose. I just adore what I'm doing now. I love guiding other women through what they're going through because I struggled alone. I literally hid every element of what we were going through from everyone around us. Like nobody would have been the wiser. My partner and I, for 3 years, were trying to conceive a baby. And, from the outset, we went through all of the testing. We did the initial 12 months of trying on our own before we sought advice from specialists and doctors. And from there, it was just constant testing, medications, tracking cycles, tracking symptoms, spotting symptoms, Googling things when I should have been working, all of the things. We became so consumed by what we were going through behind the scenes. I just feel like, you mentioned there that you come through it, but I felt like I almost lost myself to that. I really did. I felt like I very nearly lost my entire identity to infertility. And, if this is something that you have been through yourself, for those that are listening, just know that I send my biggest heartfelt thoughts and love to you because it is just the hardest thing to go through. Your heart's deepest desire is to bring a little soul into this world that you can just put all of your love and, care and energy into. And it's just not happening. And, so after 3 years, I got to that point where I was really broken and I didn't recognize myself. And I was just a shadow of myself, just a shell, just kind of in survival mode, just getting by, going through the motions, showing up to work. From the outside, everything looked the same, nothing really changed. But as soon as I got home at the end of the day, like it was just, my system was just shutting down. Like my nervous system was just wrecked. I was in fight or flight or like that really desperate forced energy for so long that I just had no way of regulating anything that we were going through. And so I was finding myself with these massive emotional outbursts that I would, keep under wraps and keep the lid on really tightly during the day. And then I'd get home and I'd just find myself, sobbing in the bottom of the shower, just falling to pieces. And, I guess in my safe space at home and not really choosing to do the things that used to bring me joy or not spending time with the people that used to, lift me up and bring me up. So yeah, it was really hard. And I reached that breaking point, I guess, and just decided that something had to change. I am a big believer that if nothing changes, nothing changes. And I reached that point. And it was a light bulb moment because it was like, if I'm getting home at the end of every day, exhausted and burnt out and drained and just no energy for anything else in life, how is my body going to have the energy to sustain a life here? Is this part of the problem? And that's when I just had to, I guess, change our approach and turn things around and look for something beyond just the biological aspect of fertility, because for so long, that's the only thing that we were focusing on, the nutrition, the timing, the cycle tracking, the supplementing, all of those sorts of things, just thinking that I could kind of force it physically to happen because as we were talking about before we hit record, we just think that there should be this inherent ability to, the moment we decide we're ready to start a family, that it just happens, overnight, because we see some people around us, or we think people around us are able to do that. So we think it should be the same for us as well. And it certainly wasn't for us, and it's certainly not for a lot of other people out there. And I just, yeah, my heart goes out to you if you're listening. And it's just one of those things that it's not spoken about enough. And when you're in it, it just feels so soul destroying and all consuming, and it feels like something that you have to struggle with behind doors. And that's why women in particular refer to themselves as infertility warriors, because it feels like you're fighting a war. Like it feels like you're going through a battle, and it's, you're in that flight or fight survival mode. And yeah, you would do anything. You would sacrifice anything just for those two pink lines and that guaranteed assurance that, in 40 weeks' time, you're going to be holding a beautiful baby in your arms. And yeah, I reached that point where I was willing to sacrifice anything and everything that it took. And I guess I just lost myself in the process. So yeah, that's, I guess, a brief
Wow.
overview of our journey. And
Yeah. And
I
I can really, like I said before we went live, that I haven't struggled with fertility, but I struggled with breastfeeding. And I find that it's that same issue that comes up, this thing of, like you said, that as women, we should just be able to do it. It should be natural. And then
yeah.
we think natural means easy. And like we were saying, that's
Mhm.
not true. I had to really unpack this when, I've had two children naturally, both different births, both breastfed, but both different breastfeeding journeys. And the second one, I would not use the word easier to describe it. It was different. And even my mind started to say to me, Aston, you've done this before. You should just be able to do it. And I had to really pull myself out of that and remind myself that anything natural in nature doesn't just happen. There's a
Yeah.
process.
Mhm.
Seeds go deep down into the darkness before they come out into the light. And they have to have these really strong roots to actually hold them before they come up. And it breaks my heart that we, particularly as women, I think we do it as human beings because we live in this, like you said, this fix it, quick fix, take the
Yeah.
supplement,
Yep.
and on the surface, those things make sense. Logically, I get it. But there is this whole other layer that is so much deeper, that's under the
So true.
surface. And I had to go through that with my breastfeeding journey, and I had to go through that, all those emotions, connect to all of that, process it. And even in my relationship 3 years ago, we had a really hard time in our relationship, and I felt the similar things you're talking about. I felt the shame. I felt myself making myself small and hiding and suppressing. And it takes so much energy to suppress everything you feel.
Yeah,
Takes so much
absolutely.
energy. I could relate to what you said, to the exhaustion of just trying to hold it all together all of the time. And what's so sad is we think we have to. We live in a world where we, like you said, we don't create safe spaces for
Yeah.
people, not even the people that we love. You know, that's why we have this connection crisis in the world, this loneliness crisis, because we're not connecting on that deeper level. We're not creating that safe space for difficult, uncomfortable conversations that are just part of life, that are actually natural, but they're not easy. And I think we really
Yeah.
need to separate those two words, because natural does not mean easy. They mean very different things. And just because something's natural doesn't mean you won't go through challenges. And I think that's the same for relationships. It's the same for fertility. It's the same for when you become a mum, because that can happen as well, that you become a mum and then you think, I should know what to do here, as if,
Yeah,
I'm a woman.
absolutely.
I should just know how to parent. I should just know how to mother. And again, that's another thing that it takes learning. And we were saying before that it's like we don't allow ourselves this time and this space to learn, to evolve, to make mistakes, to share, like, I'm struggling with this. And a big part of that is the world that we live in, that just doesn't really make us feel safe to have that conversation. And I know for me, in my relationship challenges, I had to create that safety in myself. And I feel like that's kind of the journey that you went on. I'd love to kind of talk to, once you realized, because I got to that same point that you talk about, that point where you're like, enough is enough. Like, I cannot do
Yeah.
another day like this. And it's a different
Mm.
point for everybody, but you get to that point, whether it's your relationships, your job, you know, the way you're parenting, fertility, where you live, whatever. Like, it shows up in all these different areas of your life. If you're not, you're doing the opposite to what your soul wants, it like is eroding your soul. And you get to a point where you're like, I cannot go another day. And I had that exact same moment, and I had to make radical changes to turn it around. And it's almost like in that moment you have a breakthrough and the energy completely shifts, and it's like the journey starts to unfold. So what was that moment like for you, and where did that evolve you to? Where did that journey lead you to?
Yeah, so it was actually quite ironic. I was at my company Christmas party, and I just remember being really uncomfortable and insecure being there, and I just couldn't relax. Obviously, I wasn't drinking because I hadn't had a drink for years. We were on this big journey to conceive that nobody really around us knew, and I ended up at that party confiding in somebody about what we were going through, and I just kind of got to the point in that conversation where I was like, you know what? I just almost want to give up. I just almost think that I just don't know if I can handle any more of this. I don't know if I can get through any more pain. I don't know if I can handle seeing another negative test. I don't know if I can keep going like this. Like, I just don't know who I am anymore. I'm not enjoying anything about my life anymore. Is that even a space I would want to bring a child into if I just didn't know who I was as a person anymore? And I just was feeling really lost. And so I kind of made the decision in that conversation that I was just going to take a break and take a step back and just really protect my own energy and my own space for a little bit and just regenerate and get to know myself and prioritize me. Because
Mm,
all throughout that process, I had been trying to force my body to do something. And, when was the last time your body did something without that thought first coming from your mind? Your brain tells your body to move, to do everything. Every system, breathing, everything comes first from your mind. And my mind was saying, you're broken. You're
mm,
terrified of another failure. Your body is letting you down. There's something wrong with you because you're not able to do the one thing that a woman should be able to naturally do. It was really that internal narrative on repeat, and it was just destroying me. And so I did. I took a break. I took some time off work. I sat in a beanbag for 3 weeks and read books, and it
mm,
was the best thing. And I just did those things and just got back in touch with the things that used to bring me joy and just started living again. I hadn't realized how much I'd just put everything on pause. And so I just started living, and my partner did the same. And we just really enjoyed being a couple and being in each other's space and just, I don't know, just focusing in on us and
mm,
rebuilding the foundation that had kind of honestly begun to crumble around us. Like we were so focused on bringing a baby into our family, expanding our family unit that we'd stopped going on dates and,
mm,
we'd just been going through the motions of a relationship even. And we had such different perspectives and coping mechanisms, even on the journey to conception itself. So just getting back in touch and looking at our mindset and what beliefs were really driving us was where we had to start, like right back there, back to basics,
yes.
reframing our thoughts, actually processing some of the emotion that had built up over time. That's where we had to go all the way back. And
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't an easy, natural thing to do because you just want to keep pushing on
Mm,
almost as a defense mechanism. You're like, am I going to risk not trying this month? Because what if this was the month? We had to walk
mm.
through walk through that internal dialogue as well. So yeah, I guess that's where we started. Went right back
Wow.
to there.
I have honestly goosebumps. And like you said, back to basics, but it's the basics that most people don't do because
Yeah.
it seems too hard. It seems easier just to go and blame that it's not working, or, like it's not the right time, or it just seems so much easier to just put it on the outside. And I know that even for me, when we went through our journey in our relationship, that it wasn't about blaming myself. It wasn't about saying it's my fault. And I'm sure you will echo this. It was really about, like you said, choosing you. You know, at the start of when I made that decision, because I had a similar moment of like, I'm just done. I don't even know if I can stay in this relationship. I'm not even happy. All those things that you said. And I remember having a similar moment of, I've lost myself in this. I've become consumed and bogged down in like trying to fix this problem because, so many of us are raised as those good girls, those perfectionists, those people pleasers, and we just want to get it right. And we're like, if I don't make a mistake, if I get it all right, then everyone will be happy and I'll be loved. And life doesn't work like that. And it was the same for me in my relationship, where I had to get to this moment where I did take a step back. Like you said, I took a pause and I stopped hyper focusing on my husband and what he was doing or what he wasn't doing and what was working. I stopped comparing us to other relationships, and I just fully came back to me. And exactly what you said, I made myself a priority. And that actually in the beginning was hard. And I'm sure you probably felt the same, like you're sharing, that you feel like you're choosing you. And by choosing you, you're cutting off from, or you're losing opportunities. Or, I thought, well, maybe my husband will just leave me because I'm choosing me. But in both of our experiences, it was the opposite. The very thing we wanted, we were able to create because we first chose ourselves. And I think this is huge in building that foundation, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's starting a family, like coming back to you being that foundation. Who are you being? What are you bringing to the relationship? Are you meeting your own needs? Are you happy in yourself? And just getting curious, just reconnecting. Like, it could be simple as, like you said, sitting in a beanbag and reading books. That sounds delicious to me. Like, I would love that.
It was.
It can be as simple as that. But we often, like you said, just force, make ourselves busy, distract and avoid. And then and that takes so much energy and it doesn't get us closer to what we want. Whereas if we are able to create that space, take the time off work, take a step back, have that time for ourselves, and actually intentionally connect inwards, there's so much healing that can happen there. And there's so much truth that can come through. And then you get clearer. And when that clarity drops in, you kind of, what your next steps are. And I'm sure there was a point where you even unattached from whether the outcome would be that you had a child or not, because it was the same for me. I had to unattach from whether we stayed together or not, because I was getting just so fixated on the end goal that the journey was so difficult and we weren't even making progress because I was just so fixated on I'll be happy when. And I hear this from women all the time, whether it's I'll be happy when I lose weight, or I'll be happy when I have a child, or I'll be happy when I'm married. And then we're not happy because that's not the whole thing. It's what really matters, I think, to women as well is how we feel on that journey. And we can't discount that. We can't ignore it because, like you're sharing, your body keeps the score and it then comes out. And it just wants to be processed. So I thank you so much for sharing that. And I really can relate so much with my own journey, because it was the same for me, just creating that space and sitting with all those beliefs. And, some of it is uncomfortable. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to lie. Like, it is uncomfortable to see some of those parts of yourself. But I think we really need to get real with ourselves and each other, that we all have flaws. We all have, a shadow side, a dark side, whatever you want to call it. It's just part of being human. It's
100% agree. We all have those things within us that we would rather weren't there, but until we actually take responsibility, which can be really confronting, those things aren't going to change. And, you just touched on something really important that I kind of want to elaborate on, if I may.
Yeah.
You said, that I'll be happy when thought process. I feel like through infertility in particular, it is something that you keep pushing through and you keep doing the same thing over and over, even though it's the definition of madness.
Yes.
You keep doing the same thing over and over because it's like, I'm just going to struggle because I'll be happy when I fall pregnant. I'll be happy when I
Yes.
have the baby in my arms. We'll just make these sacrifices and compromises now. And, I'm okay with suffering in this way and beating myself up and taking the hit because I know I'll be happy when.
Mm.
And, so we end up bottling things up and not processing what we're going through at the time, thinking that it'll all disappear when we get the desired outcome. And oh my gosh, I so wish that was the case. I really, really
Yeah,
do, but
but it's just
it's just
really not,
not.
isn't it? And when you
No.
speak it out loud, you're like, of course not. I mean, how could that even be
Yeah.
possible? How could you go through all of that, push it all away, and then by some miracle you get to that point? It's going to come out at some point, And I
Yeah, your
always
body
say,
has stored it. It's got all that grief and loss and
yeah,
pain just building up. Yeah.
yeah. I always say to people, it's always at the worst time. It always comes
Yeah.
out at the worst time. So I'm like, I get it's uncomfortable, but isn't it way more comfortable to process it yourself and you pull it out than at that party or at that engagement or at that baby shower where it just explodes out of you like a champagne bottle that's just been shaken up? Like,
Yeah.
because that's what happens,
Mm.
we're human beings with hearts and emotions and feelings, and emotions, they can't be logically understood. I always say to my clients that it's called feel your feelings for a reason. We can't think
Yes,
we can't think our feelings. So,
exactly.
I know the world wants us to logically go, just stop being emotional or whatever.
Mhm.
It's called feelings for a reason. So just full permission to feel it and know that you will not die. Like, I remember that's what it was for me. Like you said, I would fall to the shower. I would,
Mhm.
in the bottom of the shower, I'd fall to my knees, or in my wardrobe. That was another safe
Mhm.
space where I
Yeah.
would just feel it all and I'd fall to the floor, and it did hurt. Like, that amount of emotion when you want something so bad and your heart's invested in it, it does hurt. I describe it like a cracking open of your heart, and you literally
Yeah,
feel like you're breaking. But every
absolutely.
time for me, I would break and go through the process. The emotions would come out. Yes, it would hurt. But then on the other side, I would feel this clarity, and I would feel this like grounded solidness that no matter what, I was going to be okay. And that was because I felt like I'd allowed myself to walk through that fire. And I was,
Mm.
I was on the floor, but I was still there. And I
Yeah.
think that we need to hear more conversations like that from women, from human beings in general, about overcoming challenges, because we often share on the other side of a challenge, which I agree with, like, because you're still processing yourself. It's a lot to
Mhm.
go through it, then share and all those things. So I agree that that is probably the most effective way to share it. But I know that then when you're going through it, sometimes it can feel like you're in the mess of it, and it can appear like someone else went from A to Z really easily. But
Mhm.
it's really never the case.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I think, we were talking about before how it seems like everyone around you is having babies and falling pregnant really easily. And it's just, do you know that for sure?
Yeah.
You're hearing the happy news, but do you know the time frame that's led up to that? Because for some that may be the case. But also when we're so desperately focused on having a baby of our own, our mind is actually filtering for baby news and babies and prams, and it's the forefront of our mind. And
Yes.
so it's like we've got filters and blinkers on, and that's what we're actually searching for. So you're going to notice it more than if you
Yes.
weren't thinking about conception at all. So I guess just give yourself a break when you're
Yeah.
you're thinking that everybody around you is falling pregnant. In the scheme of things, it might feel like your friendship group is that way. And you were talking just then about, sometimes it is easier to share after the fact. And I think it is important that people do that because it kind of, I guess, supports this cultural movement that we're starting to see happen, where it's becoming okay to ask for help when you're in it. And I
Yes.
think the more conversations that we're having, and even if you talk to your friends and you find out a little bit more about their story, if you are feeling like everyone around you has had it so easy, just have a conversation with them. And that may even open up a door for you to have those genuine and raw and honest conversations that they can be so healing. And, as we're saying, they're not necessarily easy, but the impact that it can have long term on you to actually be talking and voicing what you're feeling, that's part of feeling it. Being able to articulate what you're feeling is part of actually knowing what you're feeling and processing it. So it's so important.
Yeah. And with those, because I agree, I understand why people share once they're through it, but I also wish we could create more spaces. It's the same for relationships where we intervene earlier, because I'm sure with your work, with my work, it's so much easier when you're, like, for me, at the like irritation stage of your relationship, where you're feeling a bit like roommates, a little bit irritated, a bit bored. It's so much easier than when you're at full blown resentment, or you're like, I'm ready to give up. And I'm sure it's the same for you. It's probably easier at maybe, okay, we've tried for the 12 months, but it's not working. Like, can we have a holistic approach? Go to the doctors, do all of those things. I'm all for like a holistic approach, but get curious about, what's my story that I'm telling about this? Is my focus a little bit, I don't want to say negative, but maybe just narrow, because that's what tends to happen when things don't go the way we want. We tend to just get a really narrow focus. And that's exactly what you were talking about. And then we only see what's not working. And, then that compounds, and then we repeat it. And it does. It affects your body. It affects how you feel. It affects how you behave. It's incredible the power that it has, but we're in tune with that power. We have control over that, but we're just not consciously practicing it, because for some strange reason, it's still kind of new information. It's not new information. It's been passed down for generations and years, but we're seeming to need to continue this conversation over and over again, because it's like we're forgetting our power. We disconnect from our power. And what you were saying about like being able to talk about these tough times in relationships or fertility, we used to have villages. We used to sit around together, and I wasn't there, but I can imagine that it was probably very normal. It's probably very normal to bring up these conversations in those environments, because they learnt from each other. They learnt from what they went through, how they dealt with it. And I'm a big believer in people become people through other people. I know some of the biggest shifts I've made in my life have been because of people who have crossed my path, not something surface level, someone who's deeply, crossed my path and brought something to my attention. And I've gone, wow, like that's changed me, or this conversation or this interaction, I won't be the same after this. And I think that's the beautiful opportunity that we're missing out on when we don't have these conversations. And again, it's important to have it in a safe space. I fully agree with that. You don't need to plaster all over Facebook or go and tell, every man and his dog. That's definitely not what we're saying. You want to have these vulnerable conversations in safe places. But I think the more we have them, the more we give each other permission to be human and share our human experience, because that's really all it is.
Yeah, I think it's even a rite of passage, like talking about this and being passed down information and just hearing other people's experiences and just knowing that you're not alone in this, and just knowing that you do have those places to go to and those people that you can reach out to is something that we're missing. It's become something that we suffer in silence, and we feel like we've got to keep it under wraps and keep it behind closed doors, and just it's almost like there's this shame and guilt and embarrassment around anything that's not perfect. And we can't possibly reveal what reality looks like. It's like we're just living, social media lives where, we're only on the outside of our homes, we're only showing, 10% of reality, whereas behind closed doors, we're trying to feel it all and find our way through things on our own in isolation. And that's just not the way that it should be.
No, definitely not. And I mean, no wonder women then start to question their worth. I know that's something you shared on your journey, that your whole experience made you question your worth, your job, your relationships, your body, your whole identity. And I know that when I went through challenges in my relationship, the same thing. I questioned everything. So can you share a bit about, what that was like for you, what you went through, and how you got to the other side?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's, it's fairly common that most women grow up with this idea that one day potentially they would like to become a mother. And I was very much one of those. I had, names picked out for a long time. And, I used to pretend that my brother and sister who were younger than me, I could mother them and boss them around, and I'd had lots of practice at it. And I just felt like it was going to be the most natural thing for me to transition into at the right time. I had a 10-year plan, a job, relationship, house, and then the baby. And when it didn't happen in that order, it just I really took a hit to my identity, to my self-worth, to my self-esteem, even in things like, so even at work where I wasn't letting on what was happening behind the scenes, I felt like I had to work extra hard because I was distracted. And I felt like I had to, just show up more and more powerfully as a career-driven woman to have the excuse for why I didn't have a baby yet, if that makes sense. Like really put on this persona that I was just focused on my career and really, I guess, prevent the questioning from people as to, oh, you've got the house and the relationship now, when's the baby? I just didn't even want to be asked those questions. So, at the same time that I was working really hard and doing all the extra hours and all the things that it took to be that career-driven female who wanted to have it all, at the same time, I wasn't going for promotions because I was planning in my mind to be on maternity leave soon. And so I was like, always thinking 9 months ahead from every day, every cycle.
Wow.
If I was to go on leave, what would they think if I had gone for this promotion in the meantime? Like, I just felt like I didn't want to be that person. And I mean, it wasn't the culture of the employer that I was working with at the time. It was a story that I had in my own head that, the minute that I went on maternity leave and then returned to work after having that baby, I would feel like I would need to work harder to make up for the fact that I wasn't as available 24/7 to be as responsive in that way like I used to be. And that narrative that I had, that story in my head, it was powerful. So my worth changed in my job. It changed in my relationship. I felt like I was letting my partner down. I felt like I was letting us down for not having expanded our family yet. I felt like it was my fault that the spare room hadn't been filled with a cot and the change table yet. And it was just one of those things that I took really personally. And it really did just degrade my everything, my worth, just how I felt about myself. I felt like my body was letting me down. And that's just a horrible feeling. I wasn't doing things to support my body in the way that I should because I was angry at it. I was almost kind of punishing myself for failing and just living this cycle constantly. It was just awful. And I know that there's just so many other people that are feeling the same right now in many different things, not just going through fertility, just that hit to your can just be it can just feel so awful. It really can.
Yeah. And I think this is where the shame just creates it, because all that secrecy kind of makes your mind think, oh, well, if I'm not allowed to share it, then there must be something wrong. I must have failed. I mustn't be good enough. So this is where the shame just feeds the whole disease of this, this horrible feeling. It literally, shame is like a disease. It just takes over because it literally takes over. I mean, no wonder we end up feeling that way. And you're right, whether it's fertility, relationships, anything that is considered, not normal to go through,
Yeah.
which is
Mhm.
very normal to go through.
Mhm.
It's so ironic. We have all these charged feelings around. I know a lot of women feel it around their pleasure and
Mhm.
intimacy
Yeah.
or sex, because that's been really shut down in society as well. So it just I love these conversations because it just, that shame is not allowed to exist. And when you air it, when you expose it, we were talking before we went live. That's how I felt when I shared my relationship challenges. I know that's how you felt as well when you shared your challenges for infertility. It's obviously scary. I was definitely scared initially because you're going against the grain. But once you expose it, you realize, okay, well, if I'm the one exposing it, then nobody can hurt me, and I was met with so much connection, so much love from other people who were like, you're so brave. And I'm actually having challenges. Like, thank you. And then they would open up and we'd have deeper conversations. And I felt more connected to myself, to people, to the world than I had ever felt when I was keeping it a secret. And I'm sure that it's been a similar experience for you, in that you realize I'm not alone in this. And actually, through sharing it, there's a lot of connection and there's a lot of love, and there's this massive space that kind of opens up in you. And I think it's incredibly healing.
My heart feels so full these days just from being able to connect in the way that I can. And it's not an easy conversation to have. Like, there's a lot of tears sometimes in coaching calls, but it's a really beautiful space to be able to voice what you're feeling. And it's a funny thing, like I've always been quite a private person. And so looking back now and hearing myself talking so openly and honestly and freely about this, it's kind of mind-blowing. But at the same time, going through something like this, how can you not have such a profound change within yourself? Like, what you've survived, what you've come through, just coming through it empowered, like I managed to in the end, like, and just being able to share that message with others, it just fills my heart with so much gratitude to find this. And I know it sounds cliche and maybe hard to hear when you're in the midst of it, but I mean, sometimes there's a reason for what you're going through, and if it's leading you to find something or find something out about yourself that you're not aware of yet, there's something more to this. Just like there's more to the biological aspect of fertility, there's something more to why you're going through this, whether it's a belief about yourself that your unconscious mind just desperately wants you to let go of and change and resolve, whether it's trauma that your body is telling you that it's ready to release and move on and heal from. Like, these things can be seen as indicators that there's something that you're ready to process and let go. And it's just it can be really empowering once you reach the point where you're ready for it to be.
And it's a different point for everybody, but I think exactly what you said. If we don't own our stories own us. And that, I know that's how it ended up being empowering for me. I owned that story, and I can see that you did the same. You've owned that this is part of my story. And, it's a hard part, but it's part of it. And we all have a hard part. We all have a messy middle. We all have mess. We all have magic. We're humans. It's part of the human experience. And I know for me, in my journey, it took owning all parts of myself and owning all parts of my journey to actually be able to overcome it and be empowered on the other side. We all would like to just leave out a few bits and just have the highlight reel. But I always say to people, would you go to a movie that was only the highlight reel? No.
Good point.
Would you read the book that was only the highlight reel? No, you'd be like, what's the point in reading the book? There's nothing interesting here. There's nothing I can relate to. I can't connect to this story because I'm a human being and I'm more than a highlight reel. So I really think we all need to take that away from, every story, everybody who's ever done anything amazing or great in the world. They've gone through challenges, and that's what made it worth it. And when they share their story, we don't want to just know that they got to the end. We want to know what they did, what the steps were, why they did that, where it took them, who they became. And that's true for us as well. So I think that's really important to take that away. Wow, I have got so much from this conversation, and I know that so many women listening will have as well. Thank you so much for being here, Elle. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate hearing your story and just your wisdom. And I'm just so inspired by your journey and the way you show up in the world now. It's just truly inspiring. I have got some links that I'll put in the comments in the show notes where you can find Elle. She's also provided an incredible, beautiful 15-minute guided meditation for anyone who's overcoming infertility or pregnancy related anxiety. So that is just so beautiful, and that'll be in the show notes for you as well. Is there anything else you would love to share with us before we wrap this up?
Oh, I just want to say how grateful I am to have had this conversation with you. It's been so beautiful. And, as we've touched on many times throughout this, it is important to have these sorts of conversations and just spread the word that it's okay to talk about what you're going through. There's no shame in it. It's an opportunity for real, authentic connections, and something really beautiful can come from sharing what you're going through, even when it doesn't feel easy. And so if there's anything that either Aston or I can do to support you with what you're going through, please reach out, and we'd love to support you and guide you through it.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, beautiful.
Thank you so much for having me.